The house went silent. Michael stepped into the light, and for 3 seconds he couldn't remember if he was supposed to smile or just breathe. Then someone in row 7 screamed his name. The sound hit him like a physical thing. Not applause. Not the polite theater noise he'd grown up with. This was a roar that came from 18,000 throats at once. A wave that lifted the air and pushed against his chest. He blinked once, twice, and the stage floor felt softer than it had during sound check. His right hand came up, slow, controlled, and the band held. They were watching him. Everyone was watching him. He'd rehearsed this moment 200 times in empty arenas, in hotel rooms, in his head during the flight here. But none of that prepared him for the weight of 18,000 pairs of eyes, all focused on a single point, all waiting for him to prove he could carry a show under his own name. No brothers beside him. No safety net. Just Michael, a spotlight, and a promise he'd made 6 months ago when he signed the contract for this tour. The intro track hummed through the monitor wedges at his feet. A low pulse that matched his heartbeat. He was supposed to move on the 4th bar. That was the cue. 4 bars, then the spin, then the first vocal line. Simple. He'd done it flawlessly in rehearsal. But now, standing here, he realized the rehearsal room had been silent except for the music. This place was alive. It breathed. It wanted something from him, and he didn't know yet if he had enough to give. A bead of sweat rolled past his temple. The lights were hotter than he'd expected. Not painful but insistent. They pressed down from above, cut in from the sides, and turned the front rows into a blur of shapes and colors. He couldn't see individual faces anymore. Just movement. Arms in the air. Phones. No, not phones. This was earlier than that. Waving. Reaching. He took a breath and felt his ribs expand against the costume. Tight. Precise. Every inch of fabric calculated to move a specific way under specific lights. But here's the part you can't miss. He wasn't afraid of failing. That wasn't the feeling. It was heavier than that. He was afraid of being enough, but not more. Enough to satisfy a crowd. Sure. Enough to finish the set, but not enough to make them remember. Not enough to justify the billboards, the radio spots, the interviews where he'd said, "This is going to be different." Different from what? From the group years, from the carefully managed image, from the expectations that had been built brick by brick since he was a child standing in front of talent show judges who smiled too wide and clapped too slow. The 4th bar hit. His body moved before his brain caught up. Spin. Plant. Head snapped to the right. The crowd erupted again. Louder this time, and Michael felt the floor vibrate under his boots. The first vocal cue was coming in 8 counts. He opened his mouth and nothing. Not silence. Worse, a half-second delay between his brain and his breath. He heard the track, felt the rhythm, but his diaphragm locked. Panic flickered at the edge of his vision, cold and fast. Then his voice came. Low, steady, exactly on pitch. He didn't know how. Muscle memory, maybe. Or something deeper. The crowd didn't notice the stumble. They were already screaming over the first line. 2 minutes in, and Michael realized nobody in the band had played a live show with him before tonight. Not like this. They'd toured with other acts, worked sessions, done their time in studios and clubs. But this configuration, this specific group of musicians behind him, this soundscape, this energy, it was all a first draft written in real time. Every cue he gave them was a gamble. Every transition was a test of whether they'd been paying attention during the 6 weeks of rehearsal. The monitor engineer's voice crackled in his in-ear. Vocal level good? You're sitting right on the mix. Michael didn't respond. There wasn't time. The first chorus was building, and he had to hit his mark at center stage before the lights changed. He moved left, counted 4 steps, pivoted, and felt his heel catch on something. Not a trip. Just a tug. A seam in the stage decking, maybe. Or a cable run he'd forgotten about. He adjusted mid-step and kept moving. The audience didn't see it. but he felt it. That little reminder that nothing here was guaranteed. Row 3. A woman in a red jacket was crying. Not sad crying. The kind that happens when something inside you breaks open because it's too much to hold. Michael saw her for half a second as he spun past, and the image stuck. He didn't know her. Would never know her. But she was here in this room, at this moment, because of something he'd done. A song. A video. A performance on a talk show 6 months ago. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that her face was wet and her hands were shaking, and she was smiling. Notice this. He hadn't expected that part. The rehearsals had been clinical. Hit the mark. Nail the note. Keep the tempo. But they hadn't prepared him for the emotional feedback loop. For the way a crowd's reaction could reach back across the lights and change the way he sang a line, the way he moved, the way he felt the music. It was live in a way that studio work never was. There was no second take here. No punch-in. Just this one pass. And whatever happened would be the memory. The first verse ended. The band dropped to half volume, and Michael walked to the edge of the stage. The front row was close enough to touch. Security stood in the gap, a line of black shirts and crossed arms, but the faces behind them were lit with something he couldn't name. Hunger, maybe. Or hope. He crouched low, extended his hand, and let his fingers brush the top of the barricade. A dozen hands reached up, and he pulled back before anyone could grab hold. Not because he was afraid. Because the timing was everything. Give them a moment. Not too much. Leave them wanting. He stood, turned his back to the crowd, and heard the bass drop. Second song. Faster tempo. The lights shifted from white to blue, and the stage floor reflected the change. He moved to the rhythm, felt his spine unlock, and let the choreography take over. This part was easier. The structure held him. Every step had a purpose. Every spin had a destination. He didn't have to think. Just move. But here's what you need to understand. The choreography wasn't just movement. It was conversation. He was asking the crowd a question with every gesture, and they were answering with noise. He'd raise his hand. They'd scream. He'd pause for a beat. They'd fill the silence. It was call and response, but faster and deeper than anything he'd done before. It felt like flying and drowning at the same time. The second song bled into the third. No break. No pause for applause. Just a seamless transition that the band had fought him on during rehearsal. Give them time to breathe, the musical director had said. But Michael had insisted. Keep the pressure on. Don't let them settle. Make them work to keep up. And now, standing here, he could feel it working. The crowd was leaning forward, literally. Bodies pressed against the barricade, arms stretched high, voices hoarse from screaming. They were with him. 3 songs in, the monitor wedge at stage left started cutting out. Just a flicker, a momentary drop in volume that Michael felt more than heard. He glanced toward the side stage, caught the monitor engineer's eye, and tapped his ear twice. The signal, the engineer nodded, adjusted something on the console, and the sound came back, full, clean. Michael didn't miss a step, but he filed the moment away. Something to check after the show, something to fix before tomorrow night. Wait. There was a bigger issue forming, and nobody else saw it yet. The crowd in the center section was pushing forward. Not panic, not a crush. Just incremental pressure as people in the back tried to get closer. Security noticed. One guard stepped forward, said something into his radio, and 2 more appeared at the far end of the barricade. Michael saw the movement in his peripheral vision and adjusted his position on stage. He moved right, drew the crowd's attention with him, and gave the left side time to decompress. It was subtle, instinctive, but it worked. The stage manager's voice cut into his in-ear during the bridge. We're watching the center pit. Keep pulling them stage right if you can. Michael didn't acknowledge, didn't nod, just kept moving, kept singing, and let his body drift toward the right side of the thrust. The crowd followed, like a magnet drawing iron filings, He could feel their weight shift, hear the volume tilt. Security adjusted. The pressure eased. Crisis averted before it became visible. 5 songs in, Michael's legs started to burn. Not pain, just fatigue. The adrenaline was masking it, but he could feel the edges. His calves were tight. His lower back was starting to ache. He had 12 more songs to go. The set list was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious, but he'd insisted on it. If this was going to be his first solo tour, it had to be complete. No shortcuts. No half measures. Even if it meant pushing past comfort into something sharper. He hit his mark at center stage, and the lights went dark, full blackout. The crowd screamed into the void, and for 5 seconds Michael stood in total darkness, breathing hard, waiting for the next cue. This was the transition. The moment the show shifted from high energy to something slower, something vulnerable. The piano started, soft, delicate, a single melody line that cut through the noise and made the room feel smaller. Michael lifted the microphone and sang. No movement, no choreography, just voice. The crowd went quiet. Not silent. There were still whispers, still the shuffle of 18,000 people trying not to breathe too loud. But the roar was gone. This was the test. Could he hold them without the lights, without the spectacle, just sound? He closed his eyes and felt the melody move through him. The song was older, something he'd written years ago before the label, before the contract, before any of this was real. It was personal, in a way the upbeat tracks weren't. And singing it here, now in front of people who didn't know the story behind it, that felt like exposure, like standing on stage without the costume. But here's the thing. Nobody talks about. Vulnerability isn't weakness on stage. It's power. The crowd felt the shift. They leaned in. Some of them were crying now. Not just the woman in row 3. Others, scattered across the sections. And Michael could feel their attention like a physical pull. They weren't just watching anymore. They were with him. Inside the song. Inside the moment. The piano built to a crescendo, and the drums kicked in. The lights came back, gold this time, warm and low, and Michael opened his eyes. The crowd exploded. He smiled. Not the rehearsed smile. A real one. Because he'd just done something he didn't know he could do. He'd made 18,000 people feel something they didn't expect to feel at a pop concert. He thought about the contract negotiation. 6 months ago, in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and lawyers who spoke in careful sentences. The promoter had wanted a 90-minute set. Michael had pushed for 2 hours. You'll burn out, they'd said. Not sustainable. But he'd known something they didn't. He'd known that the first show had to be a statement. Had to prove he could outlast the doubt, the skepticism, the whispers that he couldn't carry a stadium alone. 8 songs in. The tour manager appeared stage right, just outside the light line. Michael saw him during a spin, and caught the signal 5 minutes to the costume change. That meant 3 more songs in this section, then a 60-second blackout while he swapped outfits backstage. It was tight, choreographed down to the second, but it would work if the band kept tempo, and the lighting cues hit on time. The next song started with a guitar riff. Sharp, aggressive. Michael moved to the front of the stage and let the energy build again. This was the push before the break, the last big moment before the intermission. He had to leave them wanting more, had to make the wait feel unbearable. He spun, stopped, and pointed at the crowd. They screamed. He dropped to one knee, head down, and the lights cut to a single spot, silence. Then the beat dropped, and he exploded upward. The crowd matched his energy, and the room shook, literally. The floor vibrated under his feet. He could feel it in his chest, in his teeth. This was what he'd imagined when he signed the contract. This was why he'd said yes. But remember, this was still the first night. Nothing was guaranteed. The set list could fall apart. A light could blow. The sound could cut. The crowd could turn. Any of it could happen. And he'd have to adapt in real time. No net, no backup plan. just instinct and 8 weeks of rehearsal that might or might not hold under pressure. Backstage, during the 60-second costume change, Michael didn't speak. The wardrobe assistant pulled the jacket, handed him the new shirt, adjusted the collar. 30 seconds. He took 3 deep breaths, felt his heart rate drop slightly, and heard the crowd chanting his name through the walls. The sound tech's voice in his ear. 15 seconds. Stand by. He walked back to his mark. The lights came up. The crowd roared, and Michael was back in it. 10 songs in, Michael's voice started to fray. Not a crack, just a roughness at the edges. He could hear it in his monitor, feel it in his throat. He adjusted his breathing, pulled back slightly on the high notes, and compensated with movement. The crowd didn't notice, or if they did, they didn't care. They were too deep in the moment to critique. The second half of the show started with fire. Not real fire. Pyro. A controlled burst at the back of the stage that sent a wave of heat across the platform. Michael felt it on his shoulders, saw the crowd react, and moved into the next song. This one was pure spectacle. Lights, smoke, dancers appearing from the wings. The energy was different now. Bigger, louder, but also more fragile. Because spectacle only works if the foundation is solid, if the performance underneath is real. The dancers moved in formation behind him, sharp and synchronized. They'd rehearsed this section 40 times, but tonight was the first time the crowd's energy fed back into the choreography. Michael could feel them adjust in real time, tighten the spacing, sharpen the angles. They were professionals. Session dancers who'd worked with everyone from pop acts to Broadway productions. But even they were riding the adrenaline tonight. 12 songs in, Michael caught sight of the tour manager again. This time the signal was different. A subtle shake of the head. Something was off. Michael didn't know what, but he filed it. Kept moving. Kept singing. Whatever it was, it would wait until after the show. He thought about the rehearsals, the endless afternoons in the warehouse space they'd rented outside the city. Concrete floors, metal rafters, no air conditioning. The choreographer had pushed him hard. You want to prove you can do this alone? Then show me. And Michael had, day after day. Running the set, until his legs gave out, until his voice went hoarse, until the dancers were sprawled on the floor gasping for air. He'd needed to know he could survive the physical demand. And now, standing here, he realized the physical part was only half of it. The other half was mental. Staying present, staying connected. Not letting the exhaustion pull him out of the moment. The penultimate song ended, and Michael walked to center stage one last time. The lights dropped to a single spot. The band went silent. He stood there, breathing hard, sweat dripping from his chin, and looked out at the crowd. 18,000 people. All of them on their feet. All of them staring at him. He lifted the microphone and said, "Thank you." 2 words. That's all. But the crowd erupted like he'd just performed a miracle. And maybe he had. Maybe just showing up. Just finishing the show. Just proving he could carry a stadium under his own name. Maybe that was enough. The final song started. Slow build. Anthemic. The kind of track that was designed to end a show. Michael sang every word, hit every note, and felt the exhaustion creeping in at the edges. His legs were shaking. His voice was shot, but he kept going. Because that's what you do on the first night. You finish, no matter what. The arrangement built. Strings in the track swelled. The lights brightened incrementally, washing the stage in white. Michael held the final note longer than he had in rehearsal. Felt his diaphragm push against his ribs, and let the sound fill the arena. When he released it, the crowd was already screaming. He didn't wait for them to settle, just raised his hand, held it there for 3 seconds, and let the moment breathe. The last note rang out. The lights went dark. Michael stood in the blackout, chest heaving, and heard the crowd scream into the silence. Then the lights came back, full white blinding, and he raised his hand one last time. The roar was deafening, physical, He could feel it in his bones. He walked off stage, and the tour manager was waiting in the wings. "Monitor issue in the second act. We'll fix it tomorrow, but you nailed it." Michael nodded. Didn't speak. Couldn't. His throat was too raw. He walked to the dressing room, closed the door, and sat down on the couch. The roar from the arena was still audible through the walls, muffled but present. He closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. His hands were shaking. Not from nerves. From adrenaline dump. The crash after 2 hours of sustained intensity. He flexed his fingers, felt the joints protest, and leaned back into the cushions. Someone knocked. He didn't answer. The door stayed closed. First show. Done. He didn't know it yet, but the monitor issue wasn't the only problem they'd have to solve. The costume change would get tighter. The set list would shift. The choreography would evolve. 3 songs would be cut. 2 would be added. The lighting cues would be refined. But none of that mattered right now. Right now he'd survived the first night, and that was enough. The door opened. The musical director stepped in. Tempo was tight. Band's happy. "You good?" Michael looked up, nodded. "Good. Because we do it again tomorrow." Michael smiled. Not the stage smile. The real one. "Yeah, we do." The musical director left. The room went quiet. Michael sat there for 10 more minutes, listening to the muffled sound of the crowd filing out, the distant clatter of the stage crew breaking down equipment. His body ached. His throat burned. But underneath all of it was something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not because it was over. Because it had worked. He stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at his reflection. Sweat-soaked, exhausted, hair flattened against his forehead. He barely recognized himself. But the eyes were different. Sharper. More certain. He'd done it. The thing everyone said was impossible. The thing the industry whispered he couldn't pull off. He'd carried a show, alone, under his own name, and the crowd had stayed with him the entire time. He thought about tomorrow night, the second show. How it would be different. How he'd adjust based on tonight. The vocal cues that felt too early. The lighting transitions that didn't quite land. The moment in the third song where he'd stumbled on the choreography and no one had noticed. He'd fix all of it. Refine it. Make it cleaner. But tonight had been about survival. About proving the concept worked. And it had. A second knock. This time Michael answered. "Come in." The wardrobe assistant appeared with a bottle of water and a towel. Michael took the water, drank half of it in one pull. "Thanks." "Anything need adjusting?" The jacket felt tight during the third song. Michael nodded. "Let's loosen the shoulders. Just a 1/4 inch. And check the boots. Left heel caught on something." The assistant made notes. "Got it. Anything else?" "No. That's it." The assistant left. Michael finished the water, wiped his face with the towel, and sat back down. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue. He knew he should eat something. Knew he should stretch. Knew he should review the night with the team. But right now all he wanted was silence. He closed his eyes again, and replayed the show in his head. The moments that worked. The moments that didn't. The woman in row 3 crying. The monitor cutting out. The crowd pushing forward. The blackout before the ballad. The final note held longer than planned. Every detail filed away for analysis. For improvement. For tomorrow. But underneath all the technical critique was something simpler. A single thought that kept circling back. He'd done it. The thing that had terrified him for months. The thing that had kept him awake at night during the lead-up to this tour. The question of whether he could stand alone on stage and hold a crowd's attention for 2 hours without a safety net. He had his answer now. Yes, he could. The door opened again. This time it was the tour manager, holding a phone. "Promoter wants to talk. Says the box office is already seeing movement for tomorrow night. Walk-up sales doubled in the last hour." Michael took the phone. "Hello?" The promoter's voice was loud, excited. That was incredible. The energy in that room, I've never seen anything like it. We're adding a third show. Maybe a fourth. The demand is there. This is going to be huge. Michael listened. Didn't respond right away. Let the words settle. A third show. A fourth. That meant this wasn't a one-time thing. It meant the first night hadn't been a fluke. It meant people wanted more. "Let's talk tomorrow," Michael said finally. "After the second show." Of course, but I wanted you to know. This is special. What you did tonight, it's special." Michael hung up, handed the phone back to the tour manager. "You okay?" the manager asked. Michael nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." "Good. Get some rest. Long day tomorrow." The manager left. The room went quiet again. Michael stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the parking lot. Cars were still leaving. Brake lights glowing red in the dark. Thousands of people driving home, carrying the memory of tonight with them. He wondered what they'd say, how they'd describe it, whether they'd come back. He turned away from the window, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Tomorrow would come soon enough, but tonight he'd let himself feel this. The exhaustion, the relief, the certainty that he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He was a solo artist now, not in name. In reality, and everything that came after, every show, every tour, every decision, would be built on what happened tonight. He stepped into the hallway. The venue was emptying. Crew members hauling equipment. Security making final rounds. Someone called his name. He waved. Kept walking. He needed air. Needed space. Needed to let the night settle into his bones before he had to do it all over again. Outside, the night air was cool. He took a deep breath, felt his lungs expand, and looked up at the sky. No stars. Too much light pollution. But the quiet was enough. He stood there for 5 minutes, just breathing, just existing, before heading back to the bus. Tomorrow they'd do it again, and the night after that, and the night after that. But tonight was done, and it had been enough.